Well, I'd like to welcome everyone for this evening's conversation. We have a conversation with Michelle Yang, who is a senior technical product manager at Amazon. And we're going to talk a little bit about a number of things, but in particular, we want to cover kind of the key competencies and attributes of what makes someone successful in this particular role as a technical product manager. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Jeff,
A
for
little bit
the
about Michelle before we jump in. Michelle graduated from Middlebury in February 2018, majoring in economics. While at Mid, she co-created Share to Wear, a platform that enabled students to rent dresses to one another and profit from that. Michelle's a senior technical product manager at Amazon, where she spearheads the launch and expansion of digital innovations. Her expertise spans customer-centric design, global retail, and technical product management. Her contributions at Amazon involve leading product initiatives across the try before you buy business. So, Michelle, again, welcome for coming and joining us this evening. Why don't you tell us, why don't we begin with you telling us a little bit about your role at Amazon?
And thanks again for the intro and for having me here today. It's always nice to be back at Mid, so to speak. So yeah, in my current role, I'm a senior technical product manager, and I've been at Amazon for the last 7 years. In this role, I launch features on the front end of the Amazon e-commerce page that guide you to the right product. If any of you have ever shopped on Amazon for clothing, you might have seen a feature by the size box that says, like, we think medium will fit you best, or we think small will fit you best. And that's one of the features that I've most recently launched. I think talking through how I've launched that feature will give a good overview of what the role as a product manager is. So as a product manager, your role is to identify opportunities to launch features that track to your company's goal. That goal could be to increase top-line sales, to reduce bottom-line costs, increase customer acquisition, or improve order conversion, some metric that is priority. If the feature is a front-end feature, like this size feature, I then work with a UX designer to create mock-ups of what I think this feature should look like. Then I'd work with user testing to survey these mock-ups with real customers to anonymously get their feedback and validate, like, is this the right color? Is it in the right placement on the page? What is like the clickability and the interactiveness? And just get an idea of customer preferences. While all this is going on, I'm also working with a team of engineers to understand the tech development timeline and understand any limitations. Finally, at Amazon, we experiment with any feature that goes live on the e-commerce page. So in this use case, I ran an A/B experiment where 25% of customers were in the control group, meaning they did not see any feature. Another 25% saw treatment 1, which was the feature in black text. Another 25% saw treatment 2, the feature in standard Amazon blue text. And the final 25% saw the feature in a different placement on the page. And so after running this experiment, I analyzed the impact to the key metrics, such as sales impact, net cost impact, return rate, order conversion. And as the product manager, I make the final launch decision of what goes on the page. And so as the product manager, I like to say that you're kind of the quarterback of all these teams. I'm working with a UX designer, user research, 5 engineers from start to finish, and I'm managing the timelines, and I own the decision. So that gives kind of the product life cycle of the feature, and I think a good representation of the type of roles that you interact most frequently with.
So, Michelle, interesting. It is kind of funny when you think about the color of font, being a thing that you're actually testing. I'm just curious, what in that particular case, what did kind of result in the most positive result?
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I started my role, I thought that things like that didn't matter, but on a site as big as Amazon, with I think like 70% of Americans have a Prime membership, the viewers of each new feature, it's like in the hundreds of millions. So every pixel matters. In this case, we tested standard Amazon Blue, which if you like poke around the e-commerce site, you'll notice that on like certain links. And we realized in this experiment that a bolded black actually caught customers' attention more. And you can see like the impact of that within the experiment. Customers, we assume they pay attention to that more, so they pick the right size for them, and that leads to better customer satisfaction and lower returns. So even something as small as color can have a real business impact.
Sure, sure, and certainly placement on a particular web page would be important. Um, Now, I'm curious, as you probably are aware, data analytics is becoming increasingly important across various functional roles, and Middlebury recognizes that data analytics is an important capability. How much interaction would you have in your role with the data scientists that would be involved?
Kind of depends on the type of project that you're doing. In this project, to know what size fits you best, I would work with the data science team to figure out like, do we have any type of signal to which knowing like Jeff is a medium? Maybe it's previous order history. Maybe it's like things that he's clicked on. So I would work with data science to help figure out what that what an easily ingestible way to get that data would be. From a day-to-day though, like I am very comfortable in SQL. I think most tech companies require their product manager to be comfortable in SQL, and that's a way to query from big data sets. And I need to be able to do that so that I can derive insights and know like the impact of a feature that I launched, and also to figure out if there are any opportunities to create new features.
I mean, that's a great segue into a little conversation about the skills, competencies, attributes that you've experienced, you see, you use in your day-to-day work. What are some of those things that you think are important for students who may be thinking about, gee, is product management something that I would be interested in and I would be, quote, good at? What would you kind of reference are some of those skills, competencies, and attributes for folks who are successful?
Yeah. I think like, I want to put myself in a student's shoes, like to hear what a product manager means, like as a 22-year-old, like that's different than like me having like 8 years of industry experience. But I think just like taking a quick step back, I think product management is kind of in its heyday. Like it's something that everyone's talking about. It seems like everyone wants to be one. And to be honest, I don't know if it's for everyone. I think like as a student, you can evaluate if you're if you'd like product management, if you like to lead a group project and you enjoy herding all the cats and you deliver the project on time and you don't hate all your group project members and they don't hate you. I really do think that's a good example of like the day-to-day of a product manager, because you're working with so many different stakeholders with different perspectives, and you need to see your vision through and influence a lot of people to bring that vision to life. For example, with the size and fit feature, I didn't create any of the mock-ups for the feature, and I didn't do any of the technical work to put this feature on the .com page, but I influenced the engineers and the UX designers to bring that vision to life. I think at Amazon, and I'm sure at other companies, you're not going to have, not all of your ideas are going to be winners. I think like if you're comfortable like raising your hand and like being open to failure, like just saying what's on your mind, like coming up with new ideas, that's a big part of the job. And I think that's also a key competency. Like as a product manager, you have to be constantly curious about how to make features that customers love. And you have to be open to like some experiments failing. So in the classroom setting, I'd say try leading a group project and, and see how you feel.
Okay, right. Yeah, it's one of those things you have to know how to play well in the sandbox with others,
For
right?
sure.
I mean, I just jotted down a few things as you were speaking. Certainly on the technical side, there's the analytic capability, comfort with both qualitative and quantitative
Mhm.
analysis. You mentioned something that perhaps students don't necessarily recognize as a skill set that is useful in a number of different roles, and that's project management. We're
Mhm.
going to go do this initiative, and how do we get from point A to point B together?
Mhm.
So that discipline is something that would be good for them to pick up. But you also mentioned attributes, capabilities like influencing, persuading others, gaining confidence, being collaborative,
Mhm.
are things that it sounds like are important, and obviously intellectual curiosity in general would be a number of things that. So you've said a mouthful, quite honestly, in terms of number of different attributes and skills that come in. Well, let me ask you. So why do you enjoy it? What is it about the role that kind of makes your feet hit the floor in the morning when you're getting up to want to go to work?
I like to bring my ideas to reality. And I think that there are actually few jobs that let you see that whole life cycle of having an idea and then making it happen. I think it's, what drew me into product management as I navigated my career. Um, didn't start out as a product manager. And I remember like working as an analyst and, you know, working in SQL and deriving all these insights. And I would present these business insights to leaders who would then make it happen. And I always like to be in the driver's seat of like making it happen. I'm very, I index highly on execution skills. That's my forte. So it's nice to be able to feel like you can keep moving a project forward and have a direct impact too on, in terms of e-commerce retail, for me, the biggest stage. The size and fit feature, as of, I just looked it up before this call, 200 million people have seen it
Wow,
across 25 marketplaces. And
wow.
so there's a certain pride that comes with that as a product manager to really land that plane and say, like, I came up with that idea and now it's alive.
Cool. Maybe we can spend a couple of minutes just talking a little bit about the boundaries of, let's say, product manager, product designer,
Mhm.
UX designer. Um, how do you kind of see those, in this case, those three things as being distinctly different, and what's similar about them?
So I think product designer and UX designer in my nomenclature are the same.
Okay.
Um, but I'm happy to speak to the differences between a UX designer and a product manager. Product manager is like the visionary. So you come up with the idea, you figure out who you need to talk to get that idea approved, and then you like make that idea happen. Um, in the making that idea happen, you're working with a UX designer really closely. The UX designer is the one who's working in probably a platform like Adobe or Figma, and they're actually like creating the design and using tools like graphic design and also like customer centric design thinking. You're creating as a product manager a list of requirements of what you want the product to look like, and then you're handing that off to the designer to bring that to life visually. But then it's a very collaborative process between the two, to refine, like, on my end, I know that a really beautiful button, for example, that's going to take like 20 weeks of tech engineering effort. And I want to get my project over the line in 5 weeks. So I'm going to be pushing on that end. As a UX designer, your perspective is like, what is the best button in terms of like usability and accessibility and color and size and placement. And together you build something really great that hopefully the customer loves.
Cool. So let's have a little fun here and talk about for you. You're
Mhm.
currently a product manager. Where are you headed? When you peer into the future from a career perspective, what are you thinking would be the pathway forward for someone coming out of product management?
Yeah. For me specifically, or for just someone coming out of product management?
Either
Maybe
you're comfortable with, you specifically or generally.
yeah, I think I'll speak to myself first. I am going on this is my 8th year at Amazon.
Mhm.
And it's been great. I started out in fulfillment and operations and finance, and then I've been in fashion for the last 4.5 years. And actually, in June, I'm going to rotate to a new team to work on the back end for customer service. And I chose that role because I want to have basically a well-rounded experience across the pre-purchase to post-purchase customer journey. And that would really round me out there. My personal goal ultimately is to become a general manager for a consumer retail company, whether that's at Amazon or outside of Amazon at a smaller company. Ultimately, having the customer service, the fulfillment, the operations, the front end experience, that would help me really lead. Um, so that's what I'm really looking forward to. I think that's my next like 5-year goal. For product managers in general, they can really do a lot. I've seen some folks from Amazon go off to become like CEOs of smaller companies. My former mentor, who was a director of product management at Amazon, is now COO of a clothing company, Aritzia. So those are a few options. You can go to management track. You can also become more technical. I've also seen some product managers really love the technical aspect of their job and become software developer managers to be closer to that side of the business. Um, and you can also pivot to like consulting. I think consulting and product management are pretty similar in terms of job functions. In terms of collaboration with different stakeholders. So, world's your oyster.
Okay. Yeah, it does sound, and from my perspective, having come from consulting,
Mm-hmm.
um, I absolutely agree. I
Mm-hmm.
think the notion of general management in all of the different ways that you've described are perfect. And that's similar from a consulting pathway forward to those types of roles. So cool. All right. So let's switch gears and talk about your pathway, from Middlebury to Amazon, kind of take us from campus to career.
Yes. I, in some ways, was a typical Middlebury student because I was an economics major. And in my day, I think 1 in 3 Middlebury students were econ majors. And I kind of fell into that because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it felt like a really well-rounded major. And while I was an econ major, I noticed many people in my classes going on to investment banking or consulting interviews, and those felt like the two big ones. Um, and I didn't feel particularly drawn to either. Um, so when I was a senior at Middlebury, yeah, when I was a senior at Middlebury, I took a mid-core J-term class, and that was a really transformative experience. I worked with two girls post mid-core to create Share to Wear, which was the most fun and amazing thing I did at Middlebury. And basically, the concept of that was we enabled girls to rent dresses to one another and make a profit from those rentals. So we had a little studio down, I don't know if it exists anymore, like the old stone mill.
Mhm.
And from that, I actually learned a lot about myself. I learned that I really liked operations, that I was very execution focused. I was always the first to raise my hand to like get the dress catalog organized, to like run the pop-up shop, to like, figure out like the payment system. Um, and that was really a key aha moment to me of like, okay, I think I actually might like operations roles. I should explore what that could look like for me post grad. So I started looking for rotational programs because I wanted to really like try a ton of things. And I landed on a couple. One was at Gap. Gap has a great rotational program where you can learn basically how to become a buyer or a vendor manager, an account lead. And the other was at Amazon, which was more of an operations and finance heavy track. And I remember choosing between both. And I felt like Amazon would give me more exposure beyond just fashion. And so that's how I ended up at Amazon.
Okay. Now you mentioned a rotational program.
Mhm.
Um, can you spend a few minutes just talking about the power of rotational programs, from your experience?
Sure. I think for me, coming out of Middlebury, I had a really well rounded liberal arts education. But to be very transparent, I didn't feel like I knew how to do a lot of tactical things. Like, I didn't know how to use Excel, I didn't know how to like lead a meeting. And I felt like I wanted to get a ton of skills right away. Rotational programs are a great way to do that because the whole point is for you to learn. And I think both the Gap, yeah, well, at least at Amazon, we did 4 6-month rotations. Um, Two were in fulfillment centers and two were in a corporate environment. And so you got a really well rounded experience of supply chain and operations and finance because you were always doing something different. But when you were in the fulfillment center, you were getting like a very granular experience of how a package is delivered. And then in the corporate rotation, I was getting a very 10,000-foot experience of how to report on like variable costs for all fulfillment centers. So it was great to like get a 1-foot view and a 10,000-foot view, and also like sharpen skills, like learn how to use Excel and run a meeting along the way.
Right, right. Well, it would seem to me that if you knew at the time as a student that general management was kind of an area broadly that you were interested in, running a business, let's
Mm,
say, managing a business, that you really should be thinking about rotational programs potentially because of the variety of things that will expose you to, both functionally, but also from, as you were describing, on the ground floor, the shop floor, let's say, and the executive office, the headquarters, whatever it might be, getting both of those perspectives. It probably does give you a better sense of the importance of why things work the way they do, or
totally.
conversely,
Mhm.
how they might be improved.
Totally. I will pretend like I knew that I wanted to go into management and this was all part of my plan.
Very good. I know for me, coming out of undergrad, I was thinking general management, and at the time created my own kind of rotational program by moving
Mhm.
to different roles in the organization that I was with. Um, my sense is that for liberal arts majors, folks coming from a liberal arts program, uh, it does prepare you for general management types of
Mm.
ways of thinking about things much better than, let's say, a technical program might.
For
Okay.
sure. Yeah. I
Um,
just one last
Go ahead.
point on rotational programs
Mhm.
that I was thinking as you were saying that. Um, for folks like me who don't know, who didn't know what they wanted to do, I think rotational programs are a really safe way to like test your assumptions. Like, do you like being like on the ground floor? Like, do you like being in a corporate office presenting to leaders? I think sometimes it's easy to take the first role that comes your way, and then you're kind of like locked in there until you realize it's not for you. Um, Rotational programs kind of give you a safe way to do that, and because it's built into the program.
Now, you mentioned a couple of programs that you were looking at the time. Are there other ones that you might mention that you think are worth looking into as a student?
Yeah, I think if you're dead set on becoming a product manager, some great ones are at LinkedIn, Meta, Meta, and Google. I think those are within the big tech world, three really well respected product manager rotational programs, and they really train you to become a PM. Um, as for, I'll shout out the one I joined. It's still around, the Amazon Business Operations, Accounting, and Treasury Finance Rotational Program. You basically get trained on one of those tracks, and then you join this network of finance at Amazon. And then if you decide that's not for you, you can do also what I did and sidestep into product management.
Great. So let's shift a little bit and talk about some ideas what students should be aware of in terms of the interview process that they
Mhm.
might be facing out there in Amazon or in other organizations, and maybe what they can do to help prepare themselves to be as successful as they can.
Yeah, I'm actually an interviewer for my rotational program that I joined through. So I do
Really?
feel like I have I can answer this question. But the biggest thing is really, I think most companies for entry level jobs will ask you a series of behavioral questions, unless you're going already into like a technical role. Um, and to answer a behavioral question, you should answer in the STAR method, which stands for situation, task, action, and result. Um, when I'm interviewing entry level students, I don't expect them to have done like these giant projects. Like I know that they are coming from college. But one thing that really stands out to me is, the job posting is public. There's a series of bullet points that describe the role and the responsibilities. And I think one thing you can do is to just write out some of your previous experiences that track to each bullet point in the STAR method. That would give you like that would really prepare you to go into that job interview, and kind of make your case for how what you've done already applies to what you're about to do in the role.
So basically, draft out the logic flow, if you will, of how
Yep.
you would talk about your experiences in the context of the role and the position description, some of the
Hmm.
hints that they've given you in the position description about what you should be able to demonstrate.
Exactly.
um, so at Amazon, in the program that you went through an interview within, what are kind of the steps in the interview process?
Sure. The first would be just a phone screen with HR. Um, and that's just, your basic Like, what are your favorite classes? Like, why do you want this role? Like, why Amazon? Very, very basic. Should
So I'm sorry.
obviously.
So let me pause you for a second. So it's really a couple of things. One is just kind of touching on the
Mhm,
facts as you have presented them so that they
mhm.
make sure they understand what the facts are. But then it sounded like you were saying around the motivational side. Why do you want this job? Why do you want to work with us? Meaning, in this case, Amazon.
Yes. And I think, to be very transparent, it's really like, we've seen your resume. Your resume looks good enough for us to give you a chance. Now, like, just like sell yourself a little bit and like make sure that like you can communicate. And um
Right.
it's pretty, at least at Amazon, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Say why you want the job. Once you pass that, you'll get a behavioral interview, which is typically with 3 to 4 people um, that like
At
could
once.
manage. Not at once, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Three to
Yeah.
four people, one after another. A loop is what we call them. Um, and in those interviews, you would use the STAR method, and they would ask you questions um, about like, what, like, why do you want this role? Like, if you were to, I don't know, like if tell me about a time that you overcame a challenge, something like that. But
Mhm.
I would be prepared to respond using the STAR method and track it to one of the bullet points in the job description.
Now, what's your sense, Michelle? What is it that the interviewers are trying to get at in the behavioral interview?
I think like really just like, are you a normal person?
Are you real? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how like um yeah, it's funny like you just want someone who I think like has done their homework, like isn't just giving the standard spiel to everyone. Like, and that's why I keep saying like track it back to the job description, because I almost look at the job description as like a cheat sheet for the interview. Like they're telling you what they want.
Mhm.
So say it back, and match it to like something you've done. Um, at the entry level stage, at least at Amazon, there's very few technical competencies that we expect because you can learn that on the job. Um, so it's really the soft skills that we're looking for.
Okay. Yeah, I think they're in other organizations, describe it differently, but they're kind of scratching at what I'll say is fit. Can they see you being successful in the
Mm,
work environment that you're working within? Uh, can can they feel comfortable that they would enjoy working with you?
mm.
Those sorts of things. Would you say that's fair? It's part of
Yes,
the
that's fair.
evaluation?
I think maybe that that's a good way of looking at it. Like at Amazon, it's not a white collar work environment.
Mhm.
It is a big tech company that is very scrappy. And so that's also kind of that's the culture. And so we're looking also for that culture fit of, are you willing to get your hands dirty? Can you learn quickly?
Okay, super. Is there anything else you would give as advice for students as they kind of prepare and think about their future professional opportunities?
Yeah, I think like don't get too hung up on like the perfect opportunity as your first job. Like I remember like agonizing, like did I make the right decision? Like I didn't love my first rotation at Amazon. I was working in a fulfillment center in rural Wisconsin. It was very isolating. It was very different than going to a liberal arts college in Vermont. And I had to work with stakeholders I'd never worked with before, warehouse workers who like have worked in a warehouse for like 25 years. Like those were my main stakeholders. Um, and I learned a lot.
I can
And
imagine.
I didn't think that working in a warehouse for 6 months was something that I would ever find myself doing, and I definitely didn't like it the first couple of months, and I was worried that, I don't want to be in supply chain my whole life. Like, I don't know if, like, I'm getting the skills that are gonna lead me to a career that I want, and ultimately, it totally has. Like, I continue to work with tricky stakeholders every day. People who disagree with me, people who are older than me, people who have more experience than me. Um, and like having, you know, supply chain knowledge, which supply chain is the backbone of retail, has continued to help me every day in my career. Um, so, be open to like where your career leads you. The first job might not be your forever job, and that's okay.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for spending some time with us talking about your experiences and product manager role in particular.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And hopefully, and feel free to reach out to me. I know, Jeff, you've set up a portal, but I'm also happy to chat with folks more casually via email or a phone. So can share that with Jeff.
Thank you.
All right.